Good evening, everybody. Matt Geary here for the Geek Pridecast on this Monday evening. With me tonight, we have my co-host, as always, Peter Ray Allison.
Good evening, everyone.
And we have two guests from Nightfall Games. We have got Jared Earl and Mark Rapson. Gentlemen, so, who are you? What do you do? Give us your thing.
You go, Jared.
Oh, all right. I'm Jared Earl. I write and do book production for Nightfall Games, mostly on SLA Industries, but I've been doing... what's the swearing policy on this podcast?
You can swear all you want. We're
Right,
like
I've been doing a shitload of work on Terminator and the Stokerverse RPGs that we've been doing, along with Mark. But mostly I should be doing SLA, but I can't keep my hands off everything. Can't help myself. I've been doing Nightfall Games since 1993 when I met up with Dave Alsop. We used to work at 1991. I met Dave when we worked at Fantasy Forge together in Edinburgh, and we both got kicked out around the same time, and then bumped into each other afterwards and started up Nightfall Games because we have lots of things to do.
Right.
There was the pair of us and Anne Boylan, who's an old friend of ours, and we started Nightfall Games. Within the first year, we were bought by Wizards of the Coast, so I then became a Wizards of the Coast employee, took Magic around Europe, did that until 1998, and then escaped from the games industry to go and work in IT because it paid better. I did that for a while, and then gaming... I moved over to Paris for 7 years, worked over there doing IT for various companies, then moved back to Scotland. When I did, I met back up with Dave Alsop, and we got doing PDFs of SLA, just little fun things to buy us beer and that sort of thing. And that rolled over into a disastrous Kickstarter where we were hoodwinked by a couple of idiots that then turned into being rescued by Mark Rapson, who you can see in one of these corners. I can't work out which one he is on your stream. And we restarted Nightfall as a proper, let's have a go at it to get ourselves out of the trouble that we got dropped into with the Cannibal Sector 1 Kickstarter. And Mark's edition made it an absolute blast. And we were able to, the three of us, get Nightfall back together. We had Chris Shepperson also writing the rules for us at the time. But it's boiled down to the core three of us at the moment, and we're still at it and couldn't be happier. I like this incarnation a lot. Yeah, and we're productive, really productive, which I'm shocked by.
SLA Industries made a big impression when it was first released in the 90s. I mean, I never had a chance to play it, unfortunately, just lack of opportunity more than anything else. But it was visually striking. It looked amazing.
Yes, we didn't know that you weren't able to... We basically had a philosophy at the beginning that we wanted our book to be able to be put on the bookshelf next to anything in the Virgin Megastore and look like it was supposed to be there. And we were aiming at the Battletech, Vampire, D&D, obviously, and all the other games that we saw on the bookshelves there. That's what we wanted to be. We wanted to have that production quality. And none of this fanzine stapled 32-page books with a 4-page card cover. No, we had to either do it properly, go big or go home. So we decided to go big. We didn't know that there was things that we did that we weren't supposed to be able to do because we didn't know we weren't supposed to be able to do them. I mean, the whole book was put together on an Atari ST. Well, I had an Atari ST. I had two, and eventually we got a third one. And that's what we used. We used an application called Retouche Professional for scanning the art in. And we had to turn something through 90 degrees. We had to leave it overnight and then put it back on the floppy in the morning because 4 mega memory is not going to get you far. And the software we used was a thing called Dido. We used Dido and Calamus to do the actual page layout. German software that was translated. All the productivity software for the Atari ST in the 90s was German. So I had the translate. Germany went mad for the ST. It was weird.
It was always that fight between Amiga owners and Atari ST owners. So it was like, I was Atari ST. A lot of my friends were Amiga. And it was just sort of like, it was like the Sega Nintendo war, but on sort of like personal computers.
Did you know that the old Atari STs are still being used today in commercial production?
Yeah,
really?
Because the Amiga isn't. Yeah, the musicians, Fatboy Slim, for instance, has a cupboard full of old STs, just unopened, unused, in case his current one dies that he can replace with, because the MIDI synchronization chip on them is actually has less latency than any of the, up till recently, any of the PC cards, because of the clock cycles it worked on and the clock cycles that MIDI worked on. It's still used with the little monochrome monitor, still used in recording studios up and down the country.
No way, that's mad.
Didn't know that then?
There you go.
See?
You learn something new every day.
You learn on this podcast.
Yeah, that's,
I mean,
that's what we're here for, ladies and gents.
Yeah. I mean, I'm an Amiga owner. I love that. But one thing, though, the Amigas were used to create the SFX on Babylon 5.
Not quite. They were used to genlock the effects.
Oh.
The Amiga had a video synchronization chip on it that you could plug in, called a genlock, which allowed you to overlay video, and it's how they ended up in US TV studios.
Yeah, these videos and stuff.
You know the chyrons they have across the bottom of screens where it has the breaking news things. That's called a chyron, and that's used overlaid using something to synchronize the frequency with the video feed and the digital feed, and that was on the Amiga. That was called a genlock, and they used that to do all the overlays of graphics. But they did do the graphics. You are right that they did do the CGI on Amigas.
Yeah.
But they used I think it was an accelerator card to do it on.
Ah.
So it was. I think they used an Amiga with a breakout. But I could be wrong here, and someone's now going to phone into the podcast.
How old is Babylon 5? Have they were being made on Amigas?
93 was the release of the pilot, The Gathering. 94 was the first season, if I recall correctly.
I'm trying to think when I got.
It was around about then, because I do remember that while we were doing games conventions and they had guests along. Claudia Christian was a guest as one of the sci-fi guests, and I think Babylon 5 was between seasons 4 and 5 at that point. So that would put it. Your numbers seem to be pretty much accurate. We could Google it, but where's the fun in that?
And also, very interestingly, you just mentioned Claudia Christensen. She is one of the people that we will be working with in the future as well.
Wow.
Oh. She's in. She's working with a guy called Chris McCauley, who's one of the creators of the Stokerverse, and they've got big plans for future stuff, which probably will involve Nightfall as well.
Oh, nice. So what? Okay.
We need to introduce Mark at some point, by the way.
Who is this other guy with glasses?
I did warn you that we talk.
Mark, you said the magic word, Stokerverse.
Yes.
So I'm going to have to say, what is the Stokerverse? Where's it going? And what are you doing with it?
Right, so Stokerverse is the brainchild of a gentleman called Dacre Stoker, who is, I believe, the great-grandnephew of Bram Stoker.
Yeah, I've met him at Sci-Fi Weekender.
Yeah, and he is a writer who's written a number of different projects. And then Chris McCauley, who is a Irishman in Canada, who is highly prolific and he's got his fingers in lots of different pies, and between them they're creating what they call the Stokerverse, which is taking Bram Stoker's vision, which is a lot more than just the book that we all know. There's other books that were published, but there's also lots of writing as well, lots of extra writing that never got published, and they're taking that via all sorts of different formats, so audiobooks, novels, comic strips, role-playing games, board games, even miniatures games. And they're taking that world onwards using the notes. So it's a bit like, I guess, what the Tolkien family did with some of the writing that Tolkien produced that didn't get published, like the Silmarillion. It's a similar approach to that. And we were approached last year via a very good friend of mine who I've known in the industry for a good few years, called Andrew Brown. And he has a podcast called We Gamers. And I've been on there with him a couple of times, and he approached us because he knew the work we were doing with SLA and Terminator, and asked us if we wanted to get involved, and we did. And Stokerverse role-playing game, quick start, we launched that on Friday, and we're very proud of it, aren't we, Jared? I mean, it's literally we've done a lot of work to make it visually very different to what you see with Terminator or SLA, and it's got it's very appropriate feel to it. But what we've also got is Clint Langley, who we've worked with, or he was Nightfall was one of his first employers, and obviously he's then gone on to work for the likes of Rebellion with Judge Dredd, etc. He worked for GW, he's worked for Cubicle 7, I believe he's worked for lots of other places as well. But he's an awesome artist, and I've always been a big fan of his. And I asked him if he would sort of be our art director for this project, and he's kindly agreed to do so, and is producing pretty much all, if not all, of the art for it. And we're getting proper Clint Langley, because it's the perfect fit for him. It's the sort of art that he's really good at. You know, this art, gothic, dark art.
Yeah, it sounds like a sort of multimedia shared universe. Would that be a fair description?
That is a very fair description of the Stokerverse. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so obviously, like, the big issue is rights. Like, no, obviously there's Dracula out there, which has its own independent IP. So will the Stokerverse include Dracula, or is it kind of, and how does all that interact with each other?
Right. So IP on writing lasts for about 75 years, and
75 years after death.
Yeah, Dracula and Bram Stoker died more than 75 years ago. So
so it's
arguably it's general domain. But the key thing here is with the Stokerverse is that the Stoker family have all of the stuff that was never published, and they're using that as the basis for a lot of the stuff they're doing. So, for example, in the role-playing game Quickstart that we've just released, there's in effect a fourth bride that was written by Stoker, and he made notes on this bride, and he discussed her in length in his notes, but she didn't make it into the book. But arguably, she's probably the most interesting because she's really dark. She's arguably the bride that Dracula actually loves. It's quite a obviously horrific story about her being pregnant when she became a vampire, blah blah blah. So there's all that goriness going on as well, and so there's all that, but there's lots of other characters as well. And then we've brought in aspects ourselves. So for the role-playing game, we brought in, for the Quickstart, we brought in a couple of new characters that have got stuff going on, and we've got a lot of the old characters as well. So you see Harker, you see Suaj, you see those sort of people, but you see new ones as well. It's great.
Yeah. What do the characters play in Stokerverse? Are you the vampires kind of fighting against vampires, or are you the hunters?
You're neither, to be fair. So there are hunters, or there are individuals, but in the Quickstart, without giving too much away, you are you have been pulled together by Van Helsing, and one of them's his junior called Suard. Then you've also got Seagrass. Sorry. Then you've also got Harker. You've got a couple of other characters that you would have seen in it. You then have an artist and a clairvoyant, which have all been brought in, and even a police officer. And they've been pulled together because of their experiences and knowledge. And you're working together to get to the bottom of what's going on, because it seems, although Mina has gone AWOL, and potentially even Lucy is back, and you're all being pulled in to sort of try to get to the bottom of what's going on. And throughout the Quick Start mission, things become more and more apparent, and you meet other characters that you either know or haven't met before.
What is this quick? I thought you said Kickstarter. So what is Quick Start for? I have no idea what it is.
It's a term, or it's a product that's been out there quite a lot, but it's a fundamental part of our business model. So we produce a Quick Start, which is a document that ranges from 40 to 70 pages, which we release as a PDF. Pay what you want, so you can get it for free. You can pay us $1, you can pay us whatever you want for it, and it gives you it's basically a taster for the game.
Like Quick Start rules. Okay, so, I thought it was like Kickstart, but Quick Start, I thought it was like some sort of
Quick Start. All right,
Quick Start. Right. Yeah.
So we have one for SLA, we have one for Terminator, we've got one for Stokerverse, we'll have one for Harrow Vale, we'll have one for other products that we produce in the future as well. And they're a really good way of allowing people to get a taste of what this product's about, the nature of the product, the nature of the rules, the quality of the product, the quality of the art, the quality of the writing, and that's key to us because, you know, when we then go to Kickstart, we want people to know what they're getting, and we want to we're proud of what they're getting. You know, we want them to see that this product is top quality. Like Jared said about Nightfall in the 90s, is basically a core part of us now, is to be up there with the big boys, because we're not big boys, we are a fairly small team, and there's lots of big companies out there in this industry compared to us.
Yeah, but I would argue there's a certain prestige you've acquired throughout the years. Like the SLA Industries is recognised as being a very good game, and reputation counts far more than size, to be fair. Especially in this day and age where a small company can have a very big footprint purely by its presence, especially online.
And I think this is something that so Jared talked about when Nightfall first came into existence, but we, as what we sort of inverted comma call new Nightfall, came to existence around 2019, and the three of us, there was originally four as we mentioned, but the three of us have got we're very aligned in what we want to do, and we're very defined in what we want to do with regards to how we work. You know, we don't have any fancy offices, we work from home, we work using social media, and we communicate via Facebook Messenger all the time. We communicate often on the phone as well, obviously, but we aren't, you know, I live in the Midlands, so the Midlands of England, and Jared and Dave are up in Scotland. So
whereabouts, Mark?
I'm in Leamington Spa.
Oh, right, okay. Derby.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay, yeah, bit further down than you, but
yeah.
And it's it works really well, and we've been very definitive in wanting to produce. I mean, we've gone as far as taking the corporate approach with regards to sort of having a mission statement of quality writing, quality art, quality production, and we live by that as a company. And we need to stay lean to sort of continue in the industry. And I think, you know, our first two products since New Nightfall have hit big with Slay and Terminator, and obviously Stokerverse is yet to come and yet to continue, but it's looking good.
What are the challenges for smaller companies like yourself to sort of make a dent with the proverbial big boys?
I think, well, obviously Kickstarter is an interesting one, because obviously we are a small organisation, but we're not the smallest. We're not somebody out of the block, so we're in a bit of a halfway house. We're in that sort of weird position of hitting big in some regards, but still being small in others. So Kickstarter is still important to us. The Kickstarter also sees the big boys, or some of them, pumping out $1 million campaigns all the time. So it's a window that's great for us, and it's obviously a great revenue stream for the likes of the big companies we're talking about. So that's one thing, and then also distribution itself. So, you know, it's harder for companies like us to get out there. So, for example, we have distribution relationships with Asmodee, with Impressions in the US, and other distribution companies around the world. But that's been really hard to get. When we've literally it's taken me about 6 years in the industry to get to this position. And that's something that helps Nightfall, because Kickstarter is great and it gives you a good revenue stream, but it can be really dangerous, as Jared and Dave already know from their previous experiences, but also I know from my previous experiences, and we see a lot of companies fall by the wayside.
Dangerous in what way? Dangerous in what way? Sorry.
So
shall I tell the story, or shall you?
Well, I'll tell one, and then you can tell the specific one, if that's all right. So imagine you have just done a Kickstarter for a book.
Yeah.
Or you're in the process of doing it even, and you've said you wanted $5,000 and you're already at 10. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, 10 grand's coming in. And you do all these extra things, like you say, for example, I'll do another piece of artwork, or I'll write another mission, I'll write another book, for example. And you get that number higher and higher and higher and higher, but none of that stuff's ready. Sometimes you didn't even know you were going to do it before the Kickstarter ran. Then you get this big chunk of money in. So I don't know, say £100,000 or dollars or whatever currency you want. Oh my goodness, that amount of money in your bank account is amazing. But what people don't realize is that you've then got to spend a large chunk of that money making the product that you've promised, or products that you've promised. Also, if you then start having running costs like a warehouse, like employees, like etc., you then have a outgoing on a monthly basis. So say, for example, you've got a warehouse and 2 employees, you could argue that's £5,000 a month.
Yeah.
If your project is 10 months late, you've lost 50 grand.
Yeah.
And then you've still got to pay to print, and you've got to pay to ship. That's why it's dangerous.
I don't think I've ever had a Kickstarter that's on time, like ever.
No, and we're getting closer. Slay Second Ed was 6 months late. Terminator's probably going to be about the same, but I think Slay Collateral will be a lot less over time, and we're working hard now. So this is another thing that we're doing as a company, is we're working to get the products made before the Kickstarter in the main. So whereas in the past we went to Kickstarter with, say, 10-15% of our stuff made, we're now aiming to go there with 70 to 80% made.
Okay.
So that means it's much easier to predict the future, and it's much easier to, there's fewer problems coming up. You know, when we did the first Slay, who'd have heard of global pandemics?
That was, and the global pandemics and the knock-on shipping effect.
I was going to ask, I did forming in 2019 and then subsequent pandemic in 2020 have any impact?
It wasn't our fault. We didn't cause it. It wasn't us.
Just saying, coincidence. But no, did it have any impact upon Slay as a company?
No.
Okay.
That's safe to say. We were all basically, Dave, Mark, and myself were all working from home already. We were already well versed in remote working and communicating, constant communication. So when the pandemic hit, we were all well placed to carry on doing what we're doing. It didn't impact us because the only impact it had was stuff like the underlying infrastructure that everybody was being hit by. But as a company, no, we weren't actually badly impacted.
And the other thing is, we work hard. You know, it's not like we're not sitting around often. Like, once we finish this call, I'll be working. Been working all day on Terminator as well, and we work hard. Dave works exceedingly hard all the time. I mean, this is a man that does Slay now full time. That's his job, and in the evenings he does more Slay because he wants to. You know, this is the nature, and obviously Jared's doing a full-time job and then doing this, sometimes working 2-3 in the morning, and then I'm this is my full-time job, but I'm also a single parent, and I'm also dealing with a lot of other stuff as well. But we work hard, and
fingers in pies.
If we wanted to, we've got some very big excuses in our back pocket if we ever needed them, but and real honest things that have happened over the last year. But we won't be using them because we don't need to and don't want to.
No.
You never hear Games Workshop complaining, I burnt my dinner yesterday, so your book's late.
No.
So we have to behave like the big companies. It's like, that's one of the problems with the previous Kickstarter. The people we did the Kickstarter with, when we started Daruma, they were the guy who was mainly running the Kickstarter was very much, if we give them excuses and play the sympathy card, the fans will give us money, which was blatantly not Dave and mine's philosophy, and neither was it Mark's when he came on. That was the Cannibal Sector 1 Kickstarter is how Nightfall started back up, sort of, and became an active company as opposed to just doing the PDFs we were doing. Dave and I were approached by a couple of guys who are brothers, Scottish guys in England, who wanted to make a miniatures game based around SLA Industries. So they asked us if we'd be interested, and we said, okay, make us a miniature and show us what you can do. And they then gave us a miniature of one of the scavs, and it was very good. So we thought, all right, let's do this. And we started working with them. Dave moved down to Doncaster to work on the project. And we did a Kickstarter, and it raised £48,000. But the miniatures never got made properly, and everything was constantly, they thought very much like the Ponzi scheme of, to pay for this one, we'll make some miniatures and do them on pre-order. And when they get the money in, we'll pay for this stuff here. And then we'll work out how to do the pre-order stuff. And it was constantly chasing money, throwing good money after bad, and making just bad decisions that we got hurt by. And we then ended up with the CS1 Kickstarter unfulfilled and £24,000 in debt.
God.
And then that's when Dave and I pulled out and said, well, we have two choices. We can either try and resurrect it, or we can say goodbye to SLA forever, because nobody's going to buy the second edition role-playing game that we were eventually planning on doing if we didn't do that. Basically, it would kill SLA.
And especially when you go back to that point of, we'll make the fans feel sorry for us, feel bad for us, and that was some of the stuff that was being done. So they were wringing the blood out of the stone of in people's pockets a lot, and eventually the fans were getting pissed off.
You do though. Like it was like myself and Pete were at UK Games Expo 2018 was it, when we saw Airflix?
Oh yeah.
So it was a game called Airflix, which it just actually turned up a few months back. Looked really cool. Basically World War II, kind of like Subbuteo, but with planes, and you sort of you flick it over a map and stuff. Look, we played a game. It's really cool. I backed it on Kickstarter. 4 years later, it turned up, and obviously pandemic, and the guy had, justifiable excuses. So I'm very much in the case. I understand stuff happens and stuff, but then it started getting to the point where this was going wrong and this was happening, and it was just one sort of thing after another. And even my sort of quite sort of long patience was wearing thin, because I was just like, I understand this, but surely I understand pandemic shit happens and stuff, but it's you've got to have time to sort of bring this into account and things. And I was just getting really frustrated by the end of it and stuff. And I'm just like, what sort of frustrates me about Kickstarters is that it's people who start new ones and don't seem to learn the lessons from other people who have done it already and stuff. And it's like, there's so many. If you know a Kickstarter, or you've backed a Kickstarter, all the challenges that go along with it, and why you don't sort of get that information from people is
you really don't know all of them. That's the problem. There's so many that you won't know until you're living it. I mean, I've done 13 or even 14 Kickstarters across a number of different companies, and obviously we've rescued one as well, and I rescued another one before that was technically 10 years late, I think. No, 8 years late. Well,
it's like Star Citizen.
So but there is so many stumbling blocks, and I think the other thing as well to remember is, imagine making a rule book for a role-playing game. So you're talking probably 240 pages roughly. You're talking a front cover art. You're talking probably 100 or so art pieces inside. You're talking the layout. You're talking the printing. You're talking the shipping. And people go on to Kickstarter asking for, say, £5,000, and then you get £6,000, or maybe 7, or if you're really lucky, 8 or 9 or 10. You are not going to make a book very easily with all that stuff in it for that price.
You're realistically looking at a 14 grand art budget for a modern sized RPG. Between 10 and 14,000. Yeah.
At least, to be fair. I mean, there's some like role-playing games that are literally just art books in and of themselves.
Yeah.
Well, people keep asking us if we're going to do art books, and we say we do. We call them RPGs.
Yeah.
and there is sharks in the water as well. So there's distribution companies that really, really wring the money out of the back out of the companies as well. Your example before of Airflix, you think the guy would have charged you for shipping in effect 4 years ago. and now he's got all that other stuff to contend with, and I know who the guy is very well. He's a mate of mine, so I know this particular example, so you probably shouldn't talk about it, but
my apologies.
That's all right.
The game's really good, by the way. I enjoy the game.
The miniatures in that, the little planes, I made them.
Oh, nice.
Right, okay. Wow.
My team made them. So, but anyway, he would have been stung significantly for shipping afterwards.
Yeah.
He would have been stung by import taxes, import duties, shipping going up fourfold if you can even find someone to do it. And he would have had to take all those costs himself, because he can't come back to you guys and say, by the way, I'm 2 years late on this project. Now I'm 2 years late, I've now got to find an extra 5-10 grand to ship the stuff to you.
Especially with things like Brexit happening as well before the pandemic. I mean, there's been a cavalcade of disasters.
That's happened. A couple of the other Kickstarters I had, the companies actually turned around and went, that shipping that you paid, we need more because we can't afford to. Basically, if you don't want it, you're going to have to wait a lot longer and stuff. And they basically forced the backers into sort of kind of into shipping it and stuff. And there are people that have run campaigns that have committed suicide because of Kickstarter. Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I feel really bad now. Really bad now.
Honestly, I've lived this. I've lived this experience of running one where it's not going to plan, and it is horrific. Emotionally horrific. You've got people that are getting really, really damn nasty via Kickstarter or whatever. I mean, I've had personal threats because somebody demanded that he get his game within 2 months, and I knew that it was 2 months out, and I knew that I had to ship it to him in America, which is we're using sea shipping, so it's going to take 6 weeks to get it to our local place there. So I knew it wasn't going to happen, so I cancelled it. He threatened me and my family.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so, although I think the key point is that people that are doing Kickstarters generally are not criminals and generally are not bad people, but they get themselves into an awful mess because Kickstarter gives you a big chunk of money that you then have to produce something with. Yeah. And very few Kickstarters will actually themselves make much money. Most of them will make a little bit of money that you get if you're really good at managing the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And so now you can see why we brought Mark Rapson onto Nightfall Games.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Wow. And it's, And by the way, they're beautiful models, by the way. It's an amazing game.
Thank you very much.
The fact that it's 4 years late.
Are you on a bike? Are you on a bike backpedaling at the moment?
No. Like, in my defense, I'm a very patient person. Like, I understand.
No, I know.
I understand.
And it's a long time. 4 years is a long time. But I know that the guy that created them is a good guy, and he does a lot for the industry generally. Because 4 years is a long time.
I didn't have any sort of ill will towards him and stuff. In the end, it was just sort of, it was getting like, it was 4 years, and I was like, it's getting a bit sort of like, and then it's like, it's coming this week, and then it didn't come that week, and then it's coming next month, and it's not coming that month, and then I was just sort of kind of going, and the annoying thing was for me, and it's like for anything that I get really late, is that the game was so good. Like, it was such a good game, or it is such a good game, and it's just sort of like, and then it's not sullied. It's sort of like, because you got a bit frustrated about it, you're sort of kind of, it come, and it's just one of those things.
That game is awesome because, so for anyone that doesn't know, it's basically, as you say, you've got a round disc of acrylic with a model of a plane on it. One of you plays the Nazis, one of you plays the Allies, and you are fighting over a neoprene mat. It's very skillful as far as a dexterity game is concerned, and you can definitely get better at it. But it's also strategic, and it's also dice rolling, so it's really, really great game. But it's not a commercially viable product with regards to going through distribution, because the amount of money it costs to make it is more than it needs to be. So, for example, distribution. Say we sell a book into distribution, and it's a 40 quid book. Say 50 quid to make it easy. We don't get anywhere near 50 quid when it goes through distribution. We're talking a number that starts with 1.
Right.
If we're lucky.
Yeah.
And
because distribution has to take their cut, then retail has to take their cut, and
everyone's pushing hard for discounts and discounts and discounts. And that's one thing I would say to people: when you buy your games, do try and buy it from your local shop if you've got one, because otherwise you won't have one. And I would also, even if they offer you 10%, don't take it, because that shop is working off tiny margins and it's giving you 10%. It's probably losing 1/3 of its income from that product.
Wow. You don't really think about that, do you? No, as greedy consumers, you just sort of kind of go, "Oh, money off, brilliant, yeah."
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you go to Amazon and you get it £5 cheaper, but Amazon, they're not supporting that product. They're not the ones that you can go and play that game in. They're not the ones that will tell you about it and give you something to browse.
And you won't accidentally meet someone else who plays the same games as you when you go to the Amazon website.
And that's it. And I just highly recommend, if you get a chance, and that doesn't help me. It doesn't help us as the publishers, because we don't get that extra 10% or so. But that will keep that shop alive, or give it more chance to stay alive.
And if you don't want to go to your local shop, buy on Kickstarter or buy directly from a company's website. Because when we sell something on the Kickstarter, we make, if we weren't able to do Kickstarters, we would not be able to sell our books at the prices we do, because the initial money we get off selling a book is, we cut out the distribution, we do it all ourselves, and we cut out the retail, we do it all ourselves, and that initial burst gets the book made, that gets the product ready.
Two questions.
It literally kickstarts it.
Two questions for you. Do you think kickstarting RPGs, which is a book, is that a lot? Do you think that's a lot easier to sort of kind of get in within a sort of kind of ballpark sort of figure time scale even than sort of a miniatures game? And
our business model for role-playing games is pretty much main book, a support product like a GM screen or a second book, and then sometimes we do a third one, which might be a printed quick start or something like that. And therefore we're in effect producing you 2 books on the Kickstarter, and then you get the paraphernalia, which is cool stuff like metal dice and dice trays and blah, 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 and BPN coins and all this sort of stuff. And they're cool as well. And they can be done fairly easily because we pay someone to make them and they send them to us. But with regards to the book, if we're doing 2 books, we're probably writing 350 pages worth of writing, and obviously the arts that go with it. That's doable. But there was a period where Kickstarters for role-playing games went up to potentially 18 books on one Kickstarter. And again, it's resulted in companies that are now big, but they are still fulfilling some of those Kickstarters 5 years later. But also, and this is why we didn't want to do it, and I don't know what the right term is, but because SLA is so dear to Nightfall and specifically to Dave and Jared, we didn't want to go off and sort of produce an 18-book Kickstarter, because what happens with an 18-book Kickstarter is that by the end of it, when you eventually get your stuff, you've got a big pile of books and you aren't going to buy any more, because you've probably at most read 1 or 2 of them. Whereas if you do smaller Kickstarters, you can get the product to people quicker, and also the people have more time to read it and enjoy it and decide they want more, and to play it as well.
Or you just do what I do and just buy everything, and it sits on a shelf, and then you feel guilty because you've not touched it.
Thank you for this. Thank you for this. Exactly. You paid for my Iron Brew.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, what I find well, given the proliferation of PDFs and tablets, you can now kind of back a role-playing game on Kickstarter, and rather than have to wait on a delivery of a physical book, you can get the PDF sent to you. And you don't have to worry about Brexit, you don't have to worry about shipping costs. It's a PDF there, and it's great.
But the thing to ask yourself is, if everyone buys PDFs, and they buy them for, I don't know, we charge £12 for them on Kickstarter for just the PDF.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot of PDFs to make enough money to make it viable for us to produce it and do it. The other thing is that a lot of people expect PDFs for free.
Especially if you buy the physical book, then but
and often they say, well, there's no extra cost, but there is extra cost because we've got to get it ready for PDF format, which isn't a massive cost, but it does take time and effort, especially when people want them bookmarked and all this sort of stuff as well.
Yeah.
And then additionally, although it's not a cost, it is a lost revenue, because if we're giving away a £12 or a £17 PDF, we're not making £17. We're making zilch. And then some people share that around, whereas a book gives us the revenue, a bigger revenue for what we're producing. I mean, it takes more. It's a thing. You're buying something actual. So PDFs are great, and I like them, but I am very much a paper.
Books first.
I have to have something tangible myself. I don't,
I like the option of you get your PDF and your main book in your Kickstarter. You get your PDF delivered early so you can start using it, but then your book arrives, and then you can actually have your thing. But if you want to play it, that's the best way to do it, is because then you can. So when we put dear listeners, when we put our tiers with buy the book, buy the PDF with the book, buy the PDF, go for the one where you get both of them.
Yeah,
and that's the best way to do it for us commercially, and it's also what we think is the highest value that you can get from us.
Exactly. And what we do is we don't tend to release the PDF in its final form before people start to get the books, because we feel that the people that have bought the books should get it alongside the people that have bought PDF only.
Of course,
and it's like we won't take books to a convention and sell them at the convention before the backers have them in their hands.
And people do that. People sell stuff before it's even got them, and it's so annoying. It's like, what? I haven't got mine yet.
You remember who they are.
Yeah. And like I said, that reputation is key. So when you see someone doing that, would you be inclined to back them again in the future? Well, probably not.
You will though.
Well, that's it. You sort of you moan about it. It's just like, I've had a few Kickstarters that have taken ages and stuff, but as much as I've moaned about it, when you get that nice thing and it's quality, you go, okay, all is forgiven. All right, I'm okay. All right. Yeah. What's your advice then? For people who are starting a Kickstarter, what are your sort of kind of top sort of tips on what they should sort of bear in mind before sort of kind of jumping into that Shark Tank?
So for me, I would say if you're brand new, if you've got your product and you're going to make it, and you've already paid for stuff and you've already written it and you've done all the writing yourself, or you've done it with your mates, don't try and recoup your losses on that. So if you go to Kickstarter with a 10 grand Kickstarter, you're probably going to struggle on a role-playing game, unless it's really you've done lots of marketing beforehand. But in itself, that has costs. So I think really we have a friend who's recently done his second Kickstarter, but his first one, he put it on there, and his objective was to get it printed and out to people that wanted it. And it wasn't about necessarily making money. He just wanted his thing to be out there.
Yeah.
And his thing was really good, and it looked good, and he did it really well. But that was his objective. Luckily for him, and because it was so good, he did walk away with a profit margin. So that would be my first thing, because you see some people go there with like, oh, I need 20 grand because it's cost me 18 to get it here, and I need 2 grand to print it. Well, actually, really, you should be going for the 2 grand, because then you build on that afterwards. And I think the other one is just don't get carried away. I mean, here, as an example, with the Daruma Kickstarter, they on their last day decided to give away a miniature that was called Digger. He's like the big, massive bad guy in Slay. If it was real, he'd be like 25, 30 foot tall. They gave it away in the last few hours. They made no money by giving it away. But every backer, it cost them £8 to produce it.
Oh,
wow.
Nice.
Wow.
It's a beautiful model,
yeah.
but eight £8 a piece that they gave away, times that by arguably 350 people. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Just be careful. Just be careful, and don't give too much away. Really keep to your budgets. And you know what? It might not work, but if you're prepared to risk your own personal finances or alternatively your reputation, then keep going. But I would often say just, manage it well, and you'll be fine.
I've always sort of...
My advice...
Sorry. Right. No, you fire away.
Okay, my advice would be budget your art and don't expect other people to help you fulfill your dream for the same amount of whatever it is you're going for that you will do. If you say, if you do the art for my Kickstarter, I'll pay you when it's successful, don't expect any artists to ever take you up on it, because it's your dream. These people don't have your dream. They have their own dreams, and they will do work for your Kickstarter for money or for whatever else they can get out of it, but not to fulfill your dream, unless they have an awful lot of faith in you for some reason, like if they're a good friend of yours. And at that, if you're going to do, you can't expect them to take 50% of the risk for 0% of the 10% of the reward, say. So do your budget on art, work out if you can actually do it, keep your book down to a decent size, 200 to 100 and something pages to 300 pages, absolute tops. Very importantly, keep your full package book and all the accessories in the simplest let's say pledge. The simplest pledge you do, make sure your simplest pledge, including packaging, is under 2 kilos. That if it goes over 2 kilos, your shipping costs will escalate at a ridiculous value. So keep it down to
We had a great discussion when we did SLA second edition. So it's a 224-page book, but it came, the sweet spot pledge included a GM screen, which came with a 16-page booklet, and it also included the quick start printed, which was this and some dice.
Oh, nice.
And we had a discussion between the three of us because it was looking like we couldn't get it to 224. And I remember, I think it was either Jared or Dave said to me, can we go to 240? And I said, we cannot. And why not? I was like, well, if we do that, we literally double our shipping charges, because that knocks us over 2 kilos. And obviously in some of the bigger pledges, the books, more than one book was bought. Yeah.
Pretty.
That's essentially what you got at the I want the books tier.
Yeah.
You got the main rule book, the quick start, which is very light, thankfully, the booklet inside the GM pack to make it a book so it doesn't accrue VAT, and the screen.
Oh, nice.
What is? I'm unfortunately, I'm really sorry for this, but I don't. What is SLA? What's the sort of background behind it? What's the?
I'll let Jared do that one.
Yeah. Thanks for that. SLA Industries.
Years.
Yeah, I've been trying to do the let me put my stuff down. I've been trying to do the elevator pitch for SLA Industries since 1993. It's a very hard thing to pitch, but essentially, you are operatives or troubleshooters working for a corporation that rules a world based on a 1980s science fiction. So you work for this great corporation that is essentially, unfortunately, probably evil. Let's be honest, it's evil. And you're not necessarily evil. You're just doing your job. And as your career goes on throughout SLA Industries, fighting, most of your day-to-day stuff will start off with your job is to clear out the sewers because there's some monsters in the sewers. Use these big guns. Here's your armor, and maybe do a bit of investigation into some murders that have been happening around that the police, like the Shiver units, aren't capable of doing because they're just the peacekeepers.
That is what you get in this. Pretty much what Jared's just said. That mission is this, and you can get this as a free download off of Drive-Thru RPG.
Yeah, okay. Go and have a read of it. It's very good. And it teaches you the basic system and will get you through a simple sewer cleaning operation. And as always, these things aren't as simple as they turn out, because where's the fun in that? But so SLA Industries, it's kind of sci-fi horror is essentially what it would be best described as, because as you start playing, you realize that things are a little bit less stable than they should be, and horrors are creeping into the universe, and there's a lot to unpack.
It's like an onion or an ogre. It's got layers and a lot of them. And
it's like millefeuille, is what you're saying.
Yeah. One of the things I would say is you've all heard of cyberpunk, where basically cyber technology is the easiest to acquire currency. You've heard of diesel punk. You've heard of steampunk, where diesel is, you can get as much diesel as you want. In steampunk, you can get enough oil and water and therefore steam as you want. That's the term so the word is made up from the thing that's bountiful and nobody really cares about, followed by the word punk.
Oh, okay.
Ours is not cyberpunk, it's not diesel punk, it's not steampunk. The closest you can go is called splatterpunk, and splatterpunk means that the cheap resource that no one cares about is life.
All right, okay, yeah.
And your life. And
life's pretty cheap to that kind.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed 2000 AD in your youth,
yeah,
you're definitely in the right sort of target.
What was that game called? A game called Splatterhouse? Was it Splatterhouse? I remember telling
you
the computer game.
Yeah, Splatterhouse.
Yeah. I remember that one.
Yeah, actually, and the other game we wanted to talk about was the Terminator RPG. Now,
oh yeah, I've heard of that.
Yes, it's heard on the edge of it, like small film,
Yeah.
How the hell did that come about?
So there's a gentleman called Gary Harper, who I don't know if either of you know him, but he used to be the operations manager of Modifius.
All right, yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
And I met him at a conference. I think it was Eschenspiel, but it might have been another one in Germany or in Europe at least. But I think it was Eschenspiel. And we got on really well. He then left, and he left Modifius, and he now works in effect for himself. And he went off to a thing and basically came across the Terminator as an IP and suggested to me that it might be a good idea for Nightfall, and gave it some thought and spoke to Dave and Jared, and we all agreed that Gary was correct. So I then had a meeting in London with the guy that runs the IP company that handles that particular company, so it's Studio Canal's IP, and he'd clearly given it a lot of thought generally about role-playing games, especially with Terminator, and he said the key thing here is nobody considers Terminator as a great RPG potential because they just think of the film, and he was right. I mean, we'd been at that point as well, but what he said and what we'd already come to the conclusion was that actually what we're actually talking about is killer robots and time travel.
Yep.
When you realize that, and it's all timey-wimey, as Doctor Who would say, you have got an awful lot of cool stuff that you can do with that. And what we also had, which we didn't realize even when we started talking to them, was that we also had all the comic books that had been published by Dark Horse. And there is a basically bountiful resource of stories, character types, robot types, etc., that just make it really, really have a lot of potential interest. And we have had the opportunity to work with these guys. Yeah, they go some of the comic books there, and there's a lot of them. And we basically sat down, and then again, Gary suggested that we get in touch with this guy called Andrew Gasker, who is the main writer
of Alien RPG.
Of Alien RPG.
Yeah, very good game.
And he's an awesome chap, and he's very attuned to Nightfall. And basically, I reached out to Andrew and had a good chat with him and asked him if he wanted on board, and he said yes, if you pay me right. And we said, okay, what do you want paying? And he said a certain amount, and we said, whew, That's a lot more than we're used to. And then we said, do you know what? This guy's worth it, because his name brings a lot with it. And also he's really forthcoming with regards to ideas, but he's also really forthcoming with promotion as well. And as it turned out, we get on really well with him, to the point that I think Jared and him have a bromance. It's that
gotta
good.
love a good bromance.
Exactly. And since then, we've brought on, we as a company have brought on our fourth man, a guy called Ben Graybean, who also was previously at Modifius. And Ben has taken over the rules half of our rules quarter of our organisation. And between the two of them, with input from lots of other people as well, we have got something rather cool, which we are very close to releasing the alpha version of.
Very, very close.
Yeah.
In fact, if we weren't talking to you right now, we would be finishing off bits of it.
Oh no.
Okay.
Feel bad again.
But no, the Terminator films, TV show and comics and the whole schmoogle, it's been set in like the 80s, it's been set in modern day, it's been set in the future. Where do you set your Terminator RPG?
This is a sandbox RPG, so you are able to play wherever you want. So as you say, we have the license we have at the moment is just Terminator, the first movie.
So just the first film?
Yes, at the moment. And
gosh.
And we are what's the word I was looking for? So it's all set around the stuff that you see in the first movie and the comic books. So it doesn't involve, for example, the second movie and the T-2000. It does not include that. And it doesn't include, for example, Goody Terminators. But
the Sarah Connor Chronicles.
It doesn't include that either. So it's literally just the Terminator and associated comic books from Dark Horse. That said, we have the potential, if we wanted to potentially acquire the license for some more of the movies. And we may do that.
How do you write an RPG with So because I'm trying to think. So it's basically a machine coming back in time to kill one person. Are the players playing as people trying to save, like John Connor or there's Sarah Connor, I guess, from the first movie?
So
you play humans as are impacted by the Terminators. It's a very open and broad.
Yeah, so you could be sent back to deal with something that the Skynet's about to do. So it's not in this, but you remember in the second movie where Sarah Connor goes off on one to go and kill the guy Miles Dyson. There's that you can potentially be doing. You could be protecting an asset. You could be what else? You could be investigating other things that are going on. You could be preventing.
You could be trying to do your regular police work, private eye type job, and come across, while you're doing this wonderful storyline of trying to find a missing person and all that, two Terminators pile through your storyline.
Are they a legitimate threat then? They're not like, I'm just going to hit. They're like.
There's all sorts of level of Terminator or cyborg in this. So you've got things as small as rats, all the way up to the T-800, which is the pinnacle of the cyborg Skynet's assets at the point of the first movie, and actually more beyond that as well from the comic book. So you've got variants on the T-800 which are nastier, bigger, bolder. You've got, for example, people that have been mimicked. So, for example, the four of us are sat here, and Peter is actually a Terminator.
Don't tell everyone.
Sorry, but he's actually a Terminator. He doesn't even know it, but he's a Terminator, and he'll get activated at some point, and he might be rock hard, or he might not be so rock hard. And then you've got other ones. Exactly. And we've got all of these, and a lot more that we aren't going to share right now because the backers will see them hopefully within the next couple of days.
Oh wow!
And so there's an awful lot going on, and I think the key point here is they said, or the whole community said, you can't make a role-playing game out of aliens. It's just an alien running around killing everybody. And
I used to have that argument myself.
Yeah, and yet you look on Peter's shelf right now, and there's a shed load of books, and there's a whole big community of people that are playing that game because it is more than just an alien killing people on a ship, or if it's aliens, a lot of aliens killing a lot of people on a planet. And that's the key point here, is that Terminator is the same, especially as we have Drew Gasker.
Yeah.
Is there a Predator? Is there a Predator RPG?
There is not.
Well, you see, there you go. There's the next one on the list right there. Again, Predator would be awesome.
And again,
didn't the Predator get involved in some of the Terminator comics?
So there is some crossover comics. So
there's Alien versus Predator, which is one of them.
Hunter's Planet
versus Terminator.
Yeah, that's two.
Transformers versus Terminator.
RoboCop versus Terminator. There was a game on the there was a game on the Mega Drive as well. RoboCop versus Terminator.
Yeah, but our unfortunately our license doesn't include the crossovers, so we can't put RoboCop in the game. And
damn it.
Yeah, although it would be awesome, and I do think there may have been something that was Alien versus Predator versus Terminator, but again,
most likely,
I think Dark Horse did a lot of cash grabs.
Oh yeah.
Well, there was recently, I was looking I was in Forbidden Planet in London recently, and looking at the comics there, and there was a My Little Pony versus Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic book.
Wow.
Okay.
I have an issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with Cerebus in it.
Yes, I remember that.
Have you played the My Little Ponies RPG, by the way?
Yes, I have.
I have as well. It's surprisingly good. I got it for one of my ex's daughters because I was like, I can try and nerdify her, and I got it, and so we played this little sort of kind of mission and stuff, and I was well getting into it.
Yeah, it's good. It's really nice. It's a good game.
Yeah, we should look into something like that. No, I don't think we have the right.
SLA Industries
from the company that brought you SLA and Terminator, Care Bears, the RPG.
Other stuff, that's actually a good segue onto other stuff we're doing. For instance, straight after this, we're going to, we'll figure it out when, we're going to be doing our Merkborg expansion.
Oh yes, I remember reading about Merkborg.
Demon Dog. Yeah. And that's just going to just be fun. There's not going to be, we're not doing that as a major Terminator-sized project, but that's going to be fun. And then, of course, we've got the project we're doing with John Hodgson at Handiwork Games, where we're doing a 5th edition setting for basically Nightfall Games and Handiwork Games are doing a 5th edition setting just because.
As in using the 5e rules. Oh, right,
yes. Yep, using 5e. Called Harrowvale.
I think the great thing about this is Dave, Jared, and Johnny sitting in a pub over many, many months and even years. Many years. Talking about this thing, and this thing that they've created in their pub talk during the first 4 pints, to be fair. After that, it goes a bit weird. But
it's true.
But what they've come up with is awesome. It's typical Nightfall and typical Handiwork in its styling. And if you've seen Johnny's stuff, like he did Beowulf, which is a beautiful book, which Jared will now show you. And his art style is so evocative. I mean,
Beowulf.
He was the main artist.
Beautiful artwork.
Lead to the One Ring, or the One Ring by Cubicle 7. He was the
art director for that.
Yeah, but his art is so appropriate for what these guys want to do for Harrowvale. This project is really exciting to me because I think it's got the three of them in there, and I'm hopefully going to add a little bit of Rhapsody as well. So it's going to look awesome. It's going to be an awesome book.
Wow, that sounds lovely. Yeah, I mean, I played D&D back in the day, back in the 80s, and it was been a time, bro.
We play it now, Pete. We play it every Thursday.
I got out of. I just didn't like it after a while. I just got sick of it and bored of it because it just felt more like a combat system. But now with like the D&D 5e, I really like it. This is a much better system.
There's like some great stuff in there.
Yeah, I like it's very streamlined. It's very fun, and it's more than just a combat system that it once was.
Yeah. And I think the key point. So I've been playing D&D for a good couple of years with friends of mine. First, we used to play in a shop, and then we played around people's houses. And then when COVID hit, we were playing over the internet. And I loved it, but I got to the point where there was no jeopardy. You know, your character is unlikely to die, very unlikely to die. And even if it does die, it's very unlikely that you can't bring it back again. And what Johnny and Dave and Jared have talked about of Harrowvale is you come up against the skeleton in Harrowvale, you're probably better off running than you are trying to fight it, because it will do you in. Because Harrowvale is a grim, dark, dirty setting where things rust, you know, and they don't know what gold coins are. They don't know what silver coins are. You go to the bar and flick your gold coin at them, they are like, that is not going to get anything. Oh, have you got any brass coins or copper coins? Sorry. Oh yeah, you can have a beer. And that's the sort of thing we really want to turn it on its head and make it so there is real jeopardy in 5th ed again.
Trudging through mud in mismatched armor.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing with these guys. So we play a game every Thursday, D&D every Thursday, and I think I spend most of my time trying to not get them killed, because you know it's quite hard when they're doing silly things, but it's like you kind of don't want to kill them because you know it's a good stream and it's good sort of they're doing the thing. But I've got to a point now where they're level 10 where I said, right, if you die now, that's it, you know, you're dead. But there's still, like you said, there's still that whole thing. It's like, yeah, well, the cleric's got a resurrection. There's a resurrection spell and there's all this other things, and they always find a way around it. So if you did have something that was a serious threat, then maybe they would take things a bit more sort of at pace, instead of just, as Pete says, hitting it with his axe and just hoping.
I'm a Dragonborn barbarian with intelligence of 8. Everything.
So a smart barbarian.
Just run. So it's funny though, man. I love it, because the one thing I love about running a D&D game, and we do homebrew, so like the rules are sort of a bit sort of they're very malleable.
Hacked.
Yeah, they're just sort of like what we just sort of do what everybody enjoys. But it's like I started off coming up with these really sort of kind of elaborate things about what they were going to do and where they go, and they completely go off in the other direction, to the point where all the stuff that I'd written was pointless, because it was just like they weren't going in that direction. So now I literally just wait for like Pete to do something and then just go with it, and then just sort of go in that way.
We had that with my the guy that was GMing for us. He'd spent a load of time planning this sort of face-off between our barbarian and this orc that he created, and spent a lot of time. And somebody else went up to that orc before he even got to the barbarian, twonked it on the head, got a crit, had some other jiggery pokery going on, and killed it. He one-shot it. The GM almost flipped the table. He was so annoyed because he'd spent so much time, and he himself felt cheated. And I think he felt cheated for our barbarian as well, but none of us knew that was the plan. And that's it for me. It's just, it gets to the point where your party goes up against an ancient dragon and no one bats an eyelid. And I love the idea that you go up against a skeleton and you begin to get a little bit concerned. That's cool for me.
I think there's like, I've not played it, but I've got a load of the Song of Ice and Fire. I think is it Ronan? And they've got sort of a bit more danger when it comes to, because you can take injuries and things are a lot more lethal in that game. So I've always wanted to run that, but obviously I haven't had time and stuff. But I like the idea of things like that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, soonish we will have Harrowvale, and you won't have to learn a new rule system, because you'll know it already.
5e with Johnny Hodgson's wondrous bits.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and also 5e has become ubiquitous now. I mean, pretty much everyone. It's a basic D&D, but with streamlined and refined, and it just works. I mean, there's other systems out there. I mean, I love the 3D publishing system. That's a really nice system. FFG's Genesis system is really, really good. We've got a lot of good systems out there.
Powered by the Apocalypse, Savage Worlds.
Yeah, Blades in the Dark.
We did try to do Savage Worlds as SLA Second Edition system before we did the Kickstarter for CS1.
Yeah.
And we started negotiating with Pinnacle for the licensing, and they said that'd be great. And how are you going to make sure that SLA Industries is now PG-13? Pardon? It turns out Pinnacle's run by a religious guy who prefers family-friendly gaming to the more adult side, which is fair enough. I mean, it's nothing wrong with that at all. But that meant that we couldn't use Savage Worlds as an official licensed system.
Right.
So we just dropped that completely and thought, well, there we go.
Do you remember that guy that accused you guys of lying because
he said
it was because
he said Pinnacle wouldn't do that? Well, I've got the emails right here, mate. I mean, why are you disputing something? I mean, people on the internet. Yeah. I mean, I know I am one.
Hashtag the internet.
Yeah, I don't understand how people can say, oh, well, I don't want to believe what you're saying, so I just won't. It's just, But yeah, we parted amicably after a short discussion with Pinnacle, and it never came to fruition. But it was, So sometimes you have to look at other reasons to use systems. But you're right, there are an awful lot of good systems out there right now, and the people have been making them for decades, ever since the 70s.
And they've been evolving as well. I mean, you look at the system way back, even 10 years ago, they've improved. Especially, a prime example is kind of the where you can pass with a disadvantage, or you can fail, but you've got a little benefit as well. It becomes a little more granular, but also becomes more story driven as well.
Yeah, and the roll 2d20. If it's a good thing, take the big one. If it's a bad thing, take the little one.
Yes,
I like that rolling for advantage.
That's really
it is.
It just completely kind of streamlines the entire +5, -3, +2, -1, +6, and on. It's advantage, disadvantage.
Who would like a little history lesson? How did D&D become an open source system?
Ooh, no idea.
TSR bankruptcy.
Sort of close. It started off in the early 90s. Peter Adkison was running Wizards of the Coast then, in his basement, and he had this system called, was it Envoy? And he had the Primal Order and other books like that were part of his. You can use it with any gaming system, and he wanted to build a gaming system that could be shared and anyone could write for it. And instead what happened is he got sued by Palladium. Yeah, Palladium sued him for putting their stats in the book. So he decided...
It was his very first book, wasn't it? And it nearly bankrupted Wizards of the Coast.
And so what they did is they decided to come up with this other game that people could play in the queues while they're waiting to sign up for games, and it became called Magic the Gathering. But if you look at the first Magic the Gathering, they'll all say it's a Deckmaster deck, because Deckmaster was a company set up to own the intellectual property of Magic the Gathering in case Palladium sued Wizards of the Coast out of existence. That's where the Deckmaster name comes from. But then that never happened, so they didn't ever have to mention it or tell the story. So yeah, when TSR went bankrupt, they didn't understand paperback sales properly. They didn't understand that sale or return doesn't mean you get the books back if they say to return them. They pulp them at the other end, so you then lose everything you've sent out as sale or return. And they got caught in a whole bunch of other stuff. And Peter Adkison swooped in, bought TSR, and then made third edition an open license because he didn't want anyone else to ever have to deal with the Palladiums of the world. And that's how. And so he started the open gaming license essentially for that reason. And because of that, D&D then became an open source game. And the D20 boom happened with 3.5, I think it was.
Yeah.
And then 4th Ed came out, and then what's Mark coming up to show us now?
I'm going to show you something.
Yes.
So this is an oversized Magic card. It's about A4. Now, I don't know if you can see can you see the
back of it?
Yeah.
Hold it next to your face, because then it'll focus on your face.
There you go. So you see that bit there? So that's the Deckmaster bit.
Yep.
Now, what's really interesting is if you look at it, there's a little line that goes across the S and the T of master. And apparently, when this was drawn, it was drawn by hand, and the pencil mark wasn't rubbed out. And every single Magic card ever since, in fact, from the existence, has to have that pencil line in it now.
That's amazing. I love stuff like this. Wow.
Otherwise, you can mark your cards.
I love it. That's amazing.
Literally, every Magic card has an errant pencil line in it.
I love stuff like that. Oh, brilliant. Every day's a school day. Brilliant. Yeah. Cheers, guys. I love little factoids like that. Really, brilliant.
It's cool, isn't
it? Yeah. I've been in and around gaming since I think it was 79 or 80 when I first played D&D. And I thought, I want to do this forever. And then I got caught up in a company called Asgard Games in 1983. Asgard Miniatures. They were one of the many Nottingham companies of that time, of the boom. Because I moved back to Nottingham in 83 and found, well, where can I play D&D? So I found the miniatures shop. Started playing in the back of their shop. Jez Goodwin, the famous Citadel miniatures guy, he used to play there. His character sheets, pencil drawn, beautiful. The best character sheets I've ever seen. So that's where I started playing D&D. I carried on with the Asgard Games Club, even though Asgard essentially got, all the staff eventually got stolen by Games Workshop. The Games Workshop is the 800-pound gorilla in Nottingham.
It is, yeah.
So eventually, I also ended up working at Games Workshop in '87 when 40k came out. I was a mail order troll and happy for it. Oh, as a
Rogue Trader, you were at the start when Rogue Trader came out. Then?
Yep.
I've still got a first edition, a Rogue Trader flying around somewhere.
September '87, I remember it well.
Yeah, I remember my father coming home with this book and this blister pack of these guys in armor with guns. I was like, "What's this madness?"
Yeah,
and then just
we do admit to being of the right age to be influenced by 40k when it came out.
I suspect, given what Peter's doing, all four of us have that book, and mine's at very similar states.
Mine isn't mine. Do you know what? My old one, I lost my old one, and then it would have been in 2000-ish. I went on eBay and found a brand new one from '87, like pristine, and I bought it for a steal. The guy, obviously, I think a mum had just been clearing out her son's thing, and I was just I got it. I was like, on it, I'm having it, so I've got it upstairs. Yeah.
I think my brother Elliot in Nottingham has my copy. Well, it's his copy now, obviously, because that's the way it works. Yeah. I know he's got all my Traveller books. It's great.
Oh man, wow!
So I got some of his D&D books, so that's the way it works. But yeah, so after I left Workshop, I ended up at helping out at what were they called? Alternative Armies. I didn't actually work there, but I knew Mac and Nick. Nick's now North Star Miniatures, and so I worked with them for a bit, and then ended up going up to Fantasy Forge, and then Nightfall. So yeah.
Just living the dream, guys.
In and around.
Living the dream. I just don't. I don't think I'm brave enough to. Like I've always told myself, and we had a brief sort of stint of going like we're gonna do this, guys. We're gonna create a game and we're gonna do this thing. And then when we all went, well, we've got mortgages and we've got things like this. We need to pay for stuff. We can't.
Do you know, I did do it. I did what you were scared to do because I was working. I was working in sales and marketing in the biological industry, and I was earning a good whack, and I was driving from here in Leamington all the way up to Runcorn every week, and I just, as I was driving to and from there, I came up with this idea for this board game which is called Devil's Run, which is where you basically battling cars, so it's a bit like Dark Future or Mad Max.
Nice.
And that was my sort of into the gaming industry, and I did a Kickstarter for that, and I quit my job, and then went from there. But that's
see,
you know, it was difficult and scary.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know. Like I've got this idea of like this like 4D sort of kind of war game where it's like there's all kind, like it's massive, and I've always told myself I don't care if I make it or I do it and I don't make any money from it, but one day I'm going to make this game just so I have at least one copy of it, just sort of the do.
Brilliant.
I don't have.
Well, just think, every day you don't work on that game is a day closer to you no longer being able to make that game happen.
This is true, man, and we've been talking about it for years. We had this whole we had a big serious sort of kind of stint where we all sat down. There's four of us, sorry, and we did this sort of extended universe about and how other games would tie into it and other things, and then we sort of kind of focused on this one part, and we went pretty far with it, and then kids, mortgages, girlfriends, everything sort of kind of life happened, and it just sort of kind of fell by the wayside. But it's just there, and it's just like one of these days. But like you said, yeah, every day it goes past. I'm 41 now, and I'm pretty sure we started that when I was in my 30s. And it's just sort of
kids, eh?
Well, I don't. This is the thing. I don't have any. I've just got a famous dog. That's it.
No, you're all kids. I'm ancient. As you can probably tell by my time scale, I'm in my 50s. So it's.
You don't look it, sir. You don't look it.
Yeah, but when we did Nightfall originally, in 92, 93, we were all unemployed. We had no job prospects, nothing. We were Thatcher's lost generation, struggling in Glasgow to try and find our way. And there were 5 of us in the same flat, a 2-bedroom flat. Dave had the living room. I had a cupboard. We all fitted in the flat somehow. And we just made it happen. And we got into debt with a bank, which no problem at all was paid by Wizards of the Coast when they bought us. But we got into debt because we had literally nothing to lose. The worst that could absolutely happen to us is we could end up losing the bank some money and ending up exactly where we were when we started, back on the dole, back pulling in £22.50 gyro. Nothing to lose. So it's much easier when you've got nothing to lose and nobody to tell you, that's actually difficult. Is it?
I've got the fear now, you see. This is it. I've got the fear. And I've got lots. I like buying board games and things like this, and it's just sort of...
Yeah, wouldn't you like other people to buy your board game?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would love it. I don't care because I like convoluted war games and stuff like that. Like I'm probably the only person who would like to play Battle for North Africa. That really like. I was sitting. I saw a copy on eBay and I was like, I wonder if I could persuade my friends to play this.
Was that the Tobruk game?
Yeah, that's the one where basically it's the most complicated war game they've ever made. Apparently, it's like it takes like 100 hours or something to play.
Yeah.
I believe they used to play that. If that's the one from the 80s, I believe they used to play that in Asgard and give up.
Oh man, me and my brother, we play Axis and Allies Global at Christmas and stuff. That's a good 18 hours of game, and we sit through it, like we go through it and stuff, and it's like I like sort of like. But I think with my game, it's about war game with scale. My issue with gaming in general is scale. So you've got games like 40k and any sort of skirmish war game and stuff where they start off because they're a small company and they've got small sections of guys, and then they go, oh, but we want to add these in and we want to add this in, and then it gets to a point where it doesn't fit on the tabletop. And then you can't scale it. Whereas I want a game, it could be even card based, like old school war game, where it's got cards. On one side of the card, it's sort of individual people. On the other side of the card, it's units, and it can scale basically depending on how much space you've got. And that was my idea, that you've got a scalable war game that can be played on a coffee table, but could scale up to a 6x4 or bigger depending on how many people you've got. And I kind of wanted to go in that direction. So I've got all these things I wanted to do with it, and just not done it basically. So one of these.
The more people making games, the better. It's like when people complain that TSR or Wizards of the Coast now are this big monolith who are destroying gaming. It's a rising tide that lifts all ships. When D&D is doing well, everyone's doing well. When D&D suddenly appears on cartoons or TV shows or in the general zeitgeist, and everyone now knows what D&D is, and 5th edition is selling like hotcakes. This is not bad for gaming. This is not bad for the hobby. This is the best. We're in a literal golden age where you can buy any game you want is out there. everyone's making games, and the quality of games is, on average, can be quite good.
I find myself getting slightly. Kickstarter is a very much a double-edged sword for me, to the point where I've had to stop doing stuff on Kickstarter because I was getting a bit too addicted. It was like back in the day.
Apart from our next Kickstarter,
of course, guys.
Back Nightfall Games. Apart from that, you're absolutely right. And also, there was recently the whole scare over Kickstarter are going to use cryptocurrency or crypto to underline it. And no, hated the concept of that. And luckily for us, because we were wondering, should our next project even be on Kickstarter? If they're going to be working on crypto backends and all this sort of stuff, do we really want to be associated with that? And it seems like they've taken heed of all these warnings that the people have been telling them, and they've sort of kind of shelved it and said, let's reinvestigate it later, which in my mind means they're never going to do it, thankfully.
Oh, good. Okay.
See, I've got this first world problem. It's kind of buyer's remorse meets sort of it's like a stress that I get when I buy stuff from Kickstarter, because I haven't played it. It just sits there, and then I get really stressed out because it's sitting there and it's got nice things and I haven't done anything with it. And it's just like, but I haven't done anything with that last thing that I did, and I want to do that, and I start getting really panicky and stuff, and to the point where I'm just like, oh my god, I can't deal with this anymore.
Well, what you should do is you should look at it in a different way. If you reframe it as, I'm supporting the industry, it doesn't matter if I never play it, I helped make it happen.
Oh, that's genius.
And if you think of it like that,
that's genius.
You can have as many unopened boxes as you want.
And to be fair, that is actually the ethos that Kickstarter came into existence with. And I think that's the thing that's been, in some regards, lost now, is that, the idea of Kickstarter, and it wasn't games, it was just general as well. That's the other thing. Games has embraced it and taken it to the nth degree. But the idea was, I've got this thing that I want to make. I can't afford to do it. I want to make it. Do you want a copy of it if I make it? And that's what it's about. And to me, in a way, some of the things that happen on Kickstarter now aren't representative of the initial ethos. And obviously, a lot of
this
these
Kickstarter.
Nice. I try not to buy tech on Kickstarter anymore. I've been burned so many times with tech and stuff. It's just they're always late. They're not as good as they sort of tend to. They're shown to be, and I'm a bit weird with tech.
I think it is a frame of mind change almost. It's like I sort of feel myself now. If I back something, it's because I want to help that person make it. And if it goes wrong, although it's a little bit disappointing, especially if I've put a lot of money in, that is what Kickstarter is about. One is not buying, one is supporting something happening.
I find myself backing some of the more old school war games and stuff now, sort of just, the ones that are smaller, and just because it's like, I loved games like that when I was growing up and stuff like that. And, it's not going to be full of nice, pretty minis and things like that, but it's sort of, I just like the idea. So I find myself backing stuff like that.
I think that's cool. I mean, I don't back that much stuff now, but what I tend to back is either friends or colleagues stuff or something that I really just want. And if I want it and it doesn't happen, it'll be disappointing because it hasn't happened, rather than I've lost them 30 or 40 or 50.
Yeah.
There was one I backed that, let me see if I can find it. It should be up here somewhere. I backed it not because I wanted to play it, but I backed it because I wanted I wanted it to exist. I wanted this RPG.
What's it called?
Good Society.
Which is called Good Society, a Jane Austen RPG.
No way.
And it is for a market and you get these cards with it and everything. And I'll never play it, but I wanted it to exist because I want people that aren't me to play games.
Yeah, and I think it's just good. You're fulfilling somebody's dream as well. They've created something.
I also think that Jane Austen is one of the finest comedy writers England's ever had, but that's another story. People seem to forget it's funny.
Thing is, there is like I'm not as noble. I think I'm generally quite a noble chap, but when it comes to sort of pretty things, it's like, ooh, I back stuff because they're shiny and they got lovely little miniatures and they do stuff like that. Sort of, but I've got a lot of friends who do similar things. They'll back stuff just for the sake of that's a cool thing. We've had people. It should exist. Yeah, we've had people in the podcast again. They just sort of go, that should exist. That well, I'm going to back that, and I think that's a really good. That's a noble cause right there.
Yeah, I think that's it, and it's what you want out of something as well, isn't it? It's whether you want it to be, some Kickstarters are all about getting a shed load of stuff for as little money as possible. Like, some of the big companies that produce sort of miniatures, and the miniatures cost about 20p each when you do the maths on how much you've paid for it. Whereas that's doable if you're a big company. Whereas if you're a small company, you can't afford to do that on a smaller scale. So again, if you're looking for a bargain, then obviously you can get that on Kickstarter. But again, that's not necessarily the objective. And also, these bigger companies have much more experience and capabilities to get it right as well. So when you have somebody that's ballsed it up, or they've done something wrong, or they're late because they didn't get it right from their sort of expected delivery. And this is one of my bugbears, by the way. I'll get to that in a second. But it's it's a very different kettle of fish if you talk about one of the really big companies that use Kickstarter versus one of the little ones. And some of the game companies that have become big because of Kickstarter, that now keep going back and getting their $3 or $4 million Kickstarters, or 8 or 9 in the case of things like Exploding Kittens and such like. Do they really need to go back again? I don't know. It seems to me that they shouldn't. And what I was going to say that I've just remembered is expected delivery dates. So when somebody sets up a Kickstarter, they have to put an expected delivery date down. If they expect their Kickstarter to have, say, 500 backers, that's the date they put down. If their Kickstarter then has 1,000, 1,500, 5,000, you are not allowed to change your expected delivery date.
Yeah.
So if you unlock the extra stuff, you can't change your delivery date. And then you can get beaten up verbally via Kickstarter for not hitting your Kickstarter date. So, for example, Slay, second edition, we had a 10,000 fulfillment. So it was going to happen at 10,000. We ended up with 90,000 or just over. Wow. So 9 times the amount. We couldn't change the expected delivery date, even though we ended up with more pages in the book, other bits being printed as well. And then take Terminator, 10 to 10 became 135.
It's over 2,000 backers throwing good money, and you suddenly realise just how.
Suppose it's very.
You want to make.
Sorry, carry on.
No, you want to make everybody really, really happy, not just because you want them to come back and buy more, but you want to deliver a quality product. You want to say you want to have something. Seeing as we're on Geek Pride, you want to have something you're proud of, something you can wave around. You see me grabbing the books out and going, "Haha, look at my books," because I'm proud of the ones I've done. I'm proud of what we do. We don't cut corners on quality, on art, or anything like that. So you have to be able to do that. And when the numbers start getting bigger and bigger, and you start adding and fulfilling all the promises you're making, it's very, very hard to meet an expected delivery date when your expected delivery date was for a book and you're suddenly doing 3. And dice, and you've got shipping from China to take into contention with, because no one in Europe's going to make your dice for that money. So you're going to have to add Chinese delivery dates on top of that, and then suddenly there's an expectation when cardboard gets rare. Cardboard gets rare, and suddenly you can't buy plastic because they can't put it in the boxes to ship it from China.
Yeah, I get very frustrated with people in the comments section in like the worst I'll put on a comment section is you said it would be with this month, what's the score, and then they say it's coming here, and that's fine with me. But you get a lot of people going, this is a scam, and I enact my right to do this and blah blah blah, and I was like, come on guys, you know how Kickstarter works.
There's a way around this, and this is something that we learned from Mark Rapson. Nightfall, me and Dave aren't Kickstarter people really. We were against the idea in the start, but Mark is really good at it. And the thing that he taught us was communication.
Yeah.
Constant status updates, communication, never lie, always tell the truth, always be honest, always put out a really good communication on where we stand. He's got these, Mark will probably show you one at one point if he's got enough time to dig into his computer and hold it up to the screen. But no, he does these spreadsheets which say which sections are complete, which sections are in process, who's doing which bits, where we're at in a big picture. And here he goes.
No, you have to wait a bit longer.
Okay. But he'll on these spreadsheets, it's got which bits have done, which bits have done, expected dates, deliveries. And because of that, we never have anyone saying, where's my books? You said they'd be here. Because if they just read the last update, they know exactly where their books are. They know exactly what stage they're in. And communicating this to your backers is part of the contract you should enter into when you take their money.
Yeah, that
you should tell them where their money is.
That for me is definitely 100%. I'm quite a patient person. In general, and I understand things go wrong, but when people don't update you, people automatically jump to the worst case conclusion, and then you get stuff like this. If you've got a constant flow of, you know what, this is happening, or we're doing this, or they're not sort of. They're being honest with you, and I love that. I prefer, half the time I don't read. I get loads of notifications, but there's some companies that do it on a weekly basis, and half the time I don't read it, but at least I know they're doing something, and then I'm happy enough just to sort of kind of go along with it.
Oh, nice.
If you turn your blur background off, Mark, it'll...
I don't know how to do that.
See where it's got your camera? At the bottom, it's got a picture of the camera. There's a change background button. And you just change that to don't do anything.
Blurry spreadsheets. Yeah, there we go.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, there we go.
Perfect.
Yeah, there we go.
Right. See, this is technology.
Oh, look at that.
We're looking at his thumb now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this later. He's gone. He's gone now.
Oh,
he's off. Technologies.
I think he dropped his camera.
There
he is.
There we are.
I'm back.
I'm back again. But hopefully you can see that now.
Yeah.
There you go.
Nice.
Yeah, so we got a spreadsheet.
It's just Google. It's just Excel, and I just do it as we go along. And I update when there's something to update. But things like this along here, Dave's done 114 of the 137 art pieces, for example, and it's stuff like that. And interesting, we've actually had other people that now copy us when we do this. They literally have said, we do this like Nightfall.
Yeah, so, that's a good idea.
Happy,
and I think that was your...
Happy to do that.
Yeah,
please steal it.
Yeah, I think that was the problem with your mate, and I feel bad now after, because I feel like I need to get, I feel like I need to get him on the podcast just to sort of kind of so he can say his piece. But he obviously whatever issues was going on in the background, there was literally radio silence for months, and then everybody just started jumping to conclusions and stuff, and I think that's where the frustration was born, because there wasn't anything happening and stuff.
The reason I do this now is because I had a Kickstarter that before Nightfall, so I have another company called Wordforge Games, and I did a Kickstarter for something called D-Day Dice, and D-Day Dice was a 10,000 Kickstarter that ended up doing 240.
Fuck. I actually think I remember D-Day Dice. I was debating getting that.
Well, it was traumatic. We ran out of money because it was massively over. I had to find £100,000 of my own money or loans, whatever, to get it finished, which I did, and paid myself back eventually as well. But that's why I have a lot of feeling for people that are in that situation, because I set up with that company, and I had a business partner who was the artist, and he basically spent a number of months working on his own project that he didn't tell me about, and therefore didn't do the work. Eventually bailed on this project, left me holding the baby metaphorically. I was very down in the dumps as a result, and I only completed it because I've got a sense of honor. But he's wandered off and done his own thing, and a really, really big mess, and people hated me and said lots of horrible things about it, and it was depressing, and I didn't want to look at the Kickstarter, and therefore I didn't update. And
now look at you, you've got the Terminator RPG.
Yeah.
See, and do you know what? I think that's you. I try my best to be to understand that there's humans behind these things as much as I want my pretty things and stuff. So I'm quite mellow in general when it comes to it, but I can see that people they see I've got a product, I want said product, therefore you're an asshole because you haven't done it. And I think they all have to understand that there is this human factor behind it, and there is, especially new companies who are doing this, that they, things go wrong, and you've got to cut them some slack. And not bitch about them on a podcast.
No. I mean, it's valid. I mean, this is the thing: is if we hadn't been talking about it, you wouldn't have ever been aware of some of the things that people in the person who's doing it are going through. And it generally, from my experience, the people that do it it's all great when it's going well, but then it goes Pete Tong, and people get depressed and sometimes suicidal, and sometimes they actually commit suicide. Now, unfortunately, fortunately, very few get that far, but sometimes people have to walk away from it. I was fortunate that I could raise 100k, but there's not that many that can.
No.
So, and that wasn't because I was 100k in the hole. It was a cash flow issue, and because I'd been massively shafted by the distribution company.
Because everyone's got to take their cut, and sometimes they do so at your expense.
Yeah,
I feel like you should write a Kickstarter best practice guide or something for new Kickstarters.
Not until he's finished his other work on books.
Yeah, I mean,
I've only killed the first boss in Elden Ring because I've been too busy on Terminator to spend. I'm not rise tarnished. I have my maiden, and I am not maidenless. But all that Elden Ring stuff that everyone's going through right now, and I've not played it as much as I wanted to because Terminator.
I haven't played a computer game for about 5 years. I haven't read a book properly. I've read one book in the last 3 years, just because my time is spent on, so my spare time is spent on being creative. As an example of getting shafted by distribution companies, when I was doing D-Day Dice, the distribution company suggested or told me that they would ship stuff that was going to China from their hub or their hub partner in Australia, New Zealand. Obviously, I agreed to that. I had no idea to think there was anything wrong with that. So these products had been shipped from Canada. Sorry, not from Canada. They'd been shipped from China to the UK, to Australia, back to China.
Fucking hell.
And the bit from Australia to China cost me £232. The pledge was 50 quid.
Ooh.
That's the sort of thing that can happen if you're not careful.
What?
That's why I have my own distribution company.
Yeah, so I'm thinking.
Well, by the way, if you want your games distributing,
if
you want Kickstarters distributing,
well, I know who to go when my awesome game comes out.
Yeah.
So what?
See, that's one of the things we should do as part of the game publishing community is we should welcome newcomers. Help people out. I did a thing recently where I put an InDesign template up, which was basically download this InDesign template. It will give you a D&D book or a role-playing book at the absolute basics. It gets you past the first couple of weeks of learning how to put a book together before you can actually put your content in. Just put it up on an insider industry insider Facebook page, and I don't even know if people used it or not. I don't care. As long as somebody read it and went, oh, so that's how you do that. Because anything we can do to help those coming up behind us, because we might want to hire them.
Yeah, good idea.
Just saying.
We might want their stuff that they make.
Or we might want their games. We might want to buy their stuff. We want to support them to make there's stuff that's happening in gaming right now that the younger generation are bringing new things to gaming that we never thought possible. Systems, the independent systems we're using now are built on 20 or 30 years of gaming background by people who are able to look back at them with fresh eyes and go, this is great. This doesn't work now. This doesn't work now. The whole session zero stuff, the X cards, all the things that make playing at conventions and stuff like that. My generation would never have done that. We'd have just said, "Suck it up, Buttercup," and slapped you about a bit and said, we don't want you in gaming because you got girl cooties or whatever." It's taken a long time for us to get to this stage, and this wouldn't happen if young people didn't come into the industry. So yeah, help them at any opportunity we can. If someone were to email me, if they get me on Twitter or Facebook and say, "I'm struggling with book production, how do I prepare this for a printer?" or something like that, there is no way on this planet that I would say, "Fuck off, shrimp."
Yeah.
This is the sort of thing you go, "Oh, I can help here." As long as it doesn't take more time than I've got, gladly step in and say, "Right, have you done this? Have you done that? What's your paper size? Who's your printer? What's your trap? What's your bleed? What's your things things that you haven't even thought of yet? How's your page flow working?" All these things. And more than willing to help people out.
There's a great example of this where somebody that we were collaborating with, he was my point of contact. So I was doing stuff with him, and he and I were talking about layout, and he said, "Oh, we should do it this way, that way, and the other way." And I was like, "Okay, well, I want to talk to Jared about it because Jared knows what it is." He's like, "Who's this? Who's Jared? Who's this Jared?" And I said, "Oh, well, he's one of the people that owns the company, but he's also very good at InDesign." And he went, "I'm very good at InDesign. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what this Jared's talking about." So anyway, this person, I put him directly in contact with Jared, and then about a week later, I spoke to him again, and he said, "Jared's amazing. Jared knows more than I've ever seen anybody do in InDesign ever," and he ain't wrong.
What is InDesign? Sorry,
it's the Microsoft Word.
Yes.
You build a document out of Microsoft Word. If you want to print that
professionally
as a book professionally, you use a layout application where you take your text, you put it in columns, you add the art and all that sort of stuff. That's InDesign is the industry standard.
Ah, right, okay.
Used to be PageMaker, Quark Express, Calamus, all the older ones like that. That then eventually InDesign took over as the industry standard. It's the 240 quid a year. Or is it 240 quid a year on the Adobe subscription. There are other ones like Publisher, what's it called? Affinity Publisher, which is 30 quid or something. Nearly as good, but you can if you can't use InDesign, you can use Affinity Publisher and you can build a book with that. But I use InDesign because it's the £800 gorilla. It does,
and it is really good. I mean, I always sort of describe myself as I'm GCSE level, getting close to first year A level, AS maybe. Jared's degree, master's level. That's it, and that's the thing. I can do stuff, but I always go, "Jared."
We have our own cloud, you see, and all of our documents are shared on the Nightfall cloud. I run a small own cloud on one of my dedicated servers because I run a small hosting business as a side project to my IT consultancy. So we've got space on a server for our own Dropbox service. Because it's self-hosted, we've got 50 or 60 gigabytes of files flying all over the place all the time. And it means that Mark can pick up the latest document that I've done and he can then tweak it a bit, save it, and then I get it back with his changes, and it's all collaborative.
Okay.
Has Mark's camera frozen?
I think yes.
Or is he just really happy?
Yes. I can't ask him the question now. He's not here. He's gone.
Oh, he'll be back.
He's disappeared.
He'll be back.
Gone.
I suspect his internet's fallen over.
Yeah.
He's having his house remodeled, which means his
so
digital infrastructure in his house is a bit
well he's sort of kind of gone off. What sort of you've got the Terminator Kickstarter, is that still going?
Yep.
Yeah, it's still on?
No, we're that finished a while ago.
Okay.
Brought in £130,000,
right.
Over 2,000 backers,
wow.
And we're working on the book right now.
And
we've go on.
What have you got going at the minute?
Nothing.
No, nothing. Okay, right.
And I can tell you why.
Okay.
I can explain. There's a reason. We were supposed to have Demon Dog, which is a side project. We literally did as a fun thing to do to keep us sane while we were working on the big projects. Dave and I just rattled out this punk Merc Borg game because Dave had an idea and we just ran with it. That's the way most things happen at Nightfall. Dave has an idea and I just run with it. So we approached Kickstarter to say, could we do it last December? And they brought in a new rule that unless you have completed, like delivered to people 4 Kickstarters, you can't run more than 1 Kickstarter at a time.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And that hit us and stopped us from being able to do what we wanted to do. But weirdly, I agree with them. Yeah. I think it's a good rule. As much as it derailed our plans, it's a good solid rule to have, because there were people who were, before they've completed one, they'll start another one to pay for the first one, and then they'll just end up in a cycle where they can never get out of it. So while we've got the SLA Industries Collateral Kickstarter, we're working on the books to fulfill. We've got the Terminator role-playing game Kickstarter that we're working on to fulfill. And once those 2 have been delivered to the public, we can then have our 4th Kickstarter after SLA 2nd Edition, SLA Collateral, and Terminator. And once we have done our 4th Kickstarter, which is going to be Demon Dog, the Merc Borg punk game, once we've done that, we will then have delivered 4 Kickstarters. And then our plans open up with Stokerverse and the other stuff.
He's back.
Hello again, Mark.
He's back.
Hello. I don't know what happened. It just booted me.
Yeah, you froze with a nice smile on your face, and you were just like this.
Ironically, you were all the same. So
yeah.
I was just
explaining to the podcast about the Kickstarter. You can't do more than 1 at a time, because they're saying, what have you got on Kickstarter at the moment?
Yes.
And the answer is nothing, not until we've delivered our 4th Kickstarter, which is likely to be
the ironic thing, because we've technically done 2 and we're about to do the 3rd one, but I as an individual have now done 14.
and we did CS1 as well under a different company name.
Yeah.
So we've technically we should be allowed to, but like I was saying, I agree with the Kickstarter rule that you shouldn't be allowed to start a Kickstarter until you've delivered.
And to be fair, although it's frustrating for us, we are 2 that are yet to be delivered, so it sort of makes sense. And I know that there are examples of companies that have got 7, 8, or 9 that they never completed, and they were just pumping them out without fulfilling. So I think it does make sense, but it is very frustrating.
Yes,
especially as we know that we are going to do it, and we have got no intention of not fulfilling and not doing anything else.
There's no way of knowing if we're in good standing or not unless we deliver 4 Kickstarters. Yeah. I get it. But like Mark said, it is frustrating. So as soon as we have finished the current ones, we will have a little one, and then
so nothing to pimp at this moment in time, basically.
Oh God, no. We're not here to pimp. We're here to
educate as well. I feel like I've learnt. Yes. I think I've learnt some very good lessons today. So yeah, it's been very good. One more question before I let you go and stuff. You were talking about sort of like, so a lot of this stuff on Kickstarter, it's all sort of built in China and stuff, and then there's obviously the issues with transport and getting things back and forth, and they do it because it's cheaper. But would it be better to have it done more locally and just pay more?
We print in Europe.
Yeah.
We print in Europe.
Yeah.
We've always printed in Europe because it's so. Well, I got burnt in 94 or 95, I think it was, with Chinese shipping for the Mort source book, when Wizards of the Coast insisted on getting it printed in China and shipping it, and it was just on boats for a very, very long time. And I thought, why are we not just printing? And Wizards of the Coast use Cartamundi in Belgium. Why couldn't we just use someone like that? So we currently use a printer in Lithuania because they're very, very good. A lot of games industry people use them, and that works. Printing in the UK doesn't work though. We tried that.
Ooh,
most companies that print in UK actually print in Europe and drop ship to the UK. Claim it's British.
All right.
They lie.
And yeah, another thing that's quite problematic at the moment with China is not only is it more expensive, but and obviously there's all the mess with the containers are all in the wrong place, so it's a lot slower to get it. But the container costs have gone from approximately £2,000 to £3,000 to 16,000. So if you imagine a product, you're arguably adding £2 to £3 per product, which is significant, especially when, as we talked about before, how much it costs to, how much you have to give away to distribution, and rightly so that everyone gets their cut, distribution and retail, etc. So, because you can't say to your distribution company, oh, sorry, it's cost me an extra £3, I'm not going to give you that cut. It's just not doable. So, yeah, I think at the moment, and board games is probably more important that there is UK ability, because board games cost a lot more because they're bigger, and also they take up more space in a container. Same thing really, but when you add in all the taxes and such, like, books tend to be cheaper with regards to tax. There isn't tax on books in this country. Tax in most of Europe is less for books than it is for games. So I believe that there's going to be a point, if it doesn't improve, where we may see fewer board games.
Which it's one of those sort of things. It's just like we're spoiled for choice for board games, but then you're stifling people's creativity and stuff, and it's just sort of it's a hard one.
I mean, interestingly, I've crunched the numbers on certain products that I was going to do board game wise, and quite simply, I don't think I can make it work at the moment because the shipping's more expensive for me to ship the stuff. Taxman wants his 20% as well on board games, which doesn't help. Plus, you've got everything else going on as well. So really, to me, I think board games, as far as I'm concerned, aren't going to be something I do much, whereas books are less affected by that.
There is also a cardboard and paper shortage that's hitting the pipeline. That several companies doing Kickstarters and trying to fulfill print jobs, they're encountering problems that they didn't anticipate at the beginning, which is, it happens.
You don't think like cardboard and paper? You think you just cut some trees down? It's fine. It's not an issue.
How do you move those trees around?
Okay.
And then why are we buying our paper from China? Why is it coming from? Because they don't have the environmental controls we do, and they can do it cheaper and all this sort of stuff. And then suddenly when Brexit happens, then even worse COVID happens, and then even worse other stuff. Although COVID, I think, was pretty much it. COVID started a delivery pipeline blockage that caused a backlog for everything, and it's moving the boxes to get things to put the things in the boxes was such a problem that people had stuff waiting for boxes to arrive before they could ship them in China. And then when they shipped them, they then had a backlog where they had to wait because there was another shipment of something else coming in before it, and all this sort of stuff that you can never anticipate. And it's just, I'm just glad that Mark has to think about that
instead of me. Amazing.
Thanks, mate.
Amazing. Wow. Well,
teamwork.
Yeah. Hashtag teamwork.
Delegation.
That's
teamwork makes the teamwork.
Right. Okay. Well, I honestly, I think I could carry on talking to you guys for many hours, but it's school night and I'm at work tomorrow. But
we'll be seeing you at the UK Games Expo.
Oh yes, UKG.
We are both there.
Yeah.
Excellent. We'll see you there.
Yep.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it, and hopefully we'll be there with a robot.
Oh,
amazing! I'm not bringing my
one that does not feel, one that does not stop.
I'm not bringing my wallet with me this time, Pete. If I do, you're keeping a hold of my credit card. So
I'll look after your credit card. Trust me.
It's like the last time. The last time we were at UKGE, I bought a load of stuff. I went, I can't sort of. how am I going to bring this home with me? So I had to come back the next day with a suitcase so I can get it all back with me.
I should have said I'd have taken it. I'd have looked after it. I took it home in my car.
Honestly, board games are
we like people
my
like
crack.
you to come to our stall.
Yeah, come and see us.
Yeah, I just sort of like pretty things must buy. So, yes, well, we will. We'll definitely. We've got our press passes, so we'll definitely be down to see us.
We'll probably have a few of our friends tagged onto our stall.
Excellent.
So that we're all in the same place and easy to find.
Yeah, we'll probably rephrase that. We're all sharing the same stand. They're not tagged onto ours.
Sure. I can't see it any other way.
How to make friends and influence people by
this is another thing that I leave to Mark. Because he does it better than me.
He's more
so
diplomatic.
Much better than me.
A lot more diplomatic. Yeah.
No, I mean it is. We look a book block book. That's the
yeah.
Awesome.
So we actually like to be with our mates, I guess is the best way of putting it. So we're going to be there with Handiwork Games. We're going to be there with Britannia Games. We're going to be there with a company called Dice Sports, who you may have heard of.
Although they're the ones who did Dice Sports are the Airflix guys, aren't they?
They are,
yeah. All right, I'll have to apologise to him when I see him then.
You'll come and see them.
I'll have a shot.
Buy him a pint at the Weatherspoons.
Yeah, I'll go. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah, definitely. Drinks run
Mark
you heard it
proper guilt tripped me, and I feel really bad.
Oh, goody.
Yeah, and we're also going to be sharing with RP Haven, which I don't know if you guys are aware of them, but they're a charity role-playing place. Group that's based in London. They've now got a set up in Edinburgh. I believe they're in Wales somewhere as well. So yeah, there's we've got a nice group of companies that we're working with and share the stand with, and pass the punters around and
homies help homies.
Yeah, exactly. It's good. It's great.
Right, chaps. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've had a ball. Like I said, I could carry on talking to you all night and stuff. I love stuff like this, especially all the little factoids and things. I love things like that. So, brilliant, yeah. So it's been a pleasure. You're more than welcome to come back on whenever you want. If you've got a new Kickstarter or you just want to have the shit, by all means, come back.
Well, as soon as we're ready to pimp something, we'll be at your doorstep.
And very nice to meet you both as well.
Yeah, you too. We'll see you in June at UKGE.
Yeah, definitely.
So for tonight, I've been Matt Geary. With me has been Peter Ray Allison.
Good night, everyone.
Jared Earl. And Mark Robson.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.